Okay, here we are at part 3 of my review of Sabine Hossenfelder's book, Existential Physics. And in the last part, part 2, I was talking about the conversations she had with David Deutsch, and he was trying to explain how some theories might not be reductionist, and that being reductionist isn't a criterion for being a good theory. And I found that to be, well, I agree with him that it shouldn't be like a requirement. All that really matters is if something is like useful, I think. I'm pretty much a pragmatist on this. So if something can generate useful predictions, then why not use it? But I do find his analogies and stuff to be kind of lacking. Like the one at the end talking about putting a man in a jar, and if you could predict the way that his knowledge would grow, then you wouldn't actually have learned anything new, because if you could predict the knowledge, then you would already have access to the knowledge. And so in the last part, I was talking about like, well, you can have like an algorithm for generating pi or something, but to actually perform the calculation, the computations to get the digits out, that's actual work. Or if you're applying it to something, where you like using some mathematical formula that needs pi, then running that calculation with all of those digits you have, that is a useful thing. And it's like you're doing something there. I did actually find it interesting to think about this idea, though, of like the growth of knowledge and trying to predict how the knowledge could grow. And I was imagining it in terms of like my own thinking. And I kind of had this mental picture of like, when I think about things, it's like stepping stones. Like if I have an idea and it's worth remembering, then I can take that as a stepping stone. And then next time when I'm, in the realm of thought of that, I can use that stepping stone to then take another step. And most of the thoughts that I have are just, I don't find them that interesting, and I throw them out, and they're not a stepping stone for future thought. And so if you're thinking about this in terms of like how far out you can get, in terms of like discovering new hypotheses, I just think it is something that you could almost compute. So I was thinking about taking the set of all knowledge, like he was talking about with universal computers being able to compute just a certain set of physical laws. So imagine that full set, and then you imagine all the pathways by which you could get from one idea to the next. And if you could kind of map that in terms of these stepping stones, like how many logical points of reference do you need to get from one point to the next, then you could kind of outline a full field of ideas, of knowledge, and then you could say, given a certain amount of time in a jar, this person at the rate of generating this many stepping stones per day could possibly get this far out. And so you could kind of predict like the distance that somebody might be able to get in terms of just deducing laws from scratch, or from the knowledge that they went into the jar with, right? So to me, I don't know. I don't really see his point there as far as like coming up with an alternative theory to reductionism or whatever, because it kind of does sound like he's admitting like, oh, you wouldn't be able to predict these things even with constructor theory or with a non-reductionist theory or system of theories. And it's like, well, what's the point then? Like, what kind of predictions can you make? But anyway, back to the book. Okay, yeah, I did just want to wrap that up from before, because I felt like I didn't quite make my point too clear. But yes, I think think I've gotten that across now. And so the next thing I want to say is like regarding really the biggest problem I have with the book, and it's something I also love, and it's Sabine's attitude towards the theories of other physicists. So like, or I guess interpretations, she might say. She would call them a religion, or no better than a religion. But she talks about the multiverse idea in all of its different forms. But in particular, like the Everett many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And yeah, so she goes in and is basically like, this is not a scientific way of thinking to imagine that the collapse of the wave function, which is random basically, trying to explain that by saying that, oh, there's just many worlds or whatever, many universes. And I mean, I like it that she's calling out physicists for being like just accepting things without a due amount of scrupulousness, I guess. But at the same time, I wouldn't call it unscientific to postulate this idea of like a universe splitting at the point of measurement. It does seem like it could potentially lead to good ideas. And so I was thinking like, it's like if we lived 500 years ago or something and we didn't have germ theory and somebody was like, I've got an idea that maybe microscopic organisms are the cause of disease. And then Sabine back in those days was like, well, we can't see it, so that's just like religion. We might as well just believe in ghosts then. Or like the theory of quarks or whatever, where it's like you can't really separate them very, I mean, I guess it's not a fair comparison because we can see some like traces of quarks and stuff, and there's possible to make a measurement. But also, she isn't making a fair comparison either, to just say that there's nothing to thinking about a many worlds interpretation and then trying to find a way you could measure some set of those theories, I think. She's just like, nope, you can't measure anything that would indicate that that is true, and so therefore it is just unscientific. And so, I don't know, I feel like that's kind of just a running theme in the book. And she does, I mean, it's again something I like, but it's something I don't like because yeah, she's kind of just like gatekeeping science in a lot of it. Like, I don't mind the part of it being like, hey, all you scientists, stop like going out and being like, this is the best way to see the universe. But I don't mind scientists being like, here is an option, here is one of the ways that we can interpret it, and that might be useful for young scientists or people who are curious to be able to understand the world and possibly come up with ways that we could measurements or experiments that we could do to be able to decide between some of these ideas. So anyway, in the next part she goes on to talk about the simulated universe, and this is where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm all on board with this. This is something that I just already agree with. Just simulated universe seems like a possibility, but rather unlikely. And so all the hype that it's the best way to explain the world just seems kind of silly. Like, I don't understand the calculations. I'm like, oh, if it's possible to simulate consciousness, then therefore it's much more likely that we are simulated. To me, it's like you would have to turn the whole universe into a computer to simulate a universe of equal size. And then, I mean, you could try to simulate just brains, but then in that case, we're just a simulated brain, and so we couldn't turn the whole universe into a computer because the whole universe doesn't really exist. So we would have to be pulling more computations out of the simulation universe than exists. It's like a conservation of computations. And so either we would have to simplify physics in some way, which it is interesting to think that maybe like quantum mechanics is some shortcut method to like simplify things. Like if there was a universe higher than ours, that you could imagine simulating a universe down, then you could like maybe fiddle with some of the knobs of quantum mechanics or something in order to make the universe easier to predict. But at some point that just runs out, right? It's computations, I feel like, should be conserved in this idea, or at least we should explain why they're not. So I do agree with her there on that. And I guess I don't really have so much of the same problem as I did in the last like many worlds thing, because I don't really hear physicists going out like, oh, the best way to explain the universe is through a simulation. So I think that's kind of the difference, is like it's more like a theory that non-physicists have. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, go ahead and consider it, but I think that these are pretty obvious questions that they need to answer. So, all right, and we'll wrap this up with one last talk about kind of the same sort of thing, the same theme of the book. And she talks about the constants of nature, all 27, whatever there are. And, you know, the efforts that some scientists are making to either reduce the number or explain why the constants are the way they are. She just is like, that is unscientific to even try. And I'm just like, particularly at this point, I'm just like, why are you just, I don't know. She can't seem to conceive of this idea that it might be possible to explain some of the constants of nature either using some of the other ones or by some overarching theory that would help us to understand, you know, why we exist in the universe that we do with the constants that we do. She just thinks that's utterly unscientific because the constants, by definition, are constant. And she probably would not like that I represented it that way, but she seems to go out of her way in the book to really make this point on this, and really, I don't know, casting a lot of doubt, just, yeah. So, I don't really understand it either, because while she's saying like we shouldn't go out and try to explain the constants, and it's unscientific to even try to imagine how we could explain them, or to even imagine that they could be different, she then also mentions Lee Smolin's idea that maybe the universe is kind of like selected for, like natural selection, where the constants can change, and so there's iterations of the universe, and the universes that go on to basically propagate are the ones that maximize the number of black holes. And then so he's done some calculations on like how if you change like the cosmological constant or whatever, you would have a fewer number of black holes. And so she does admit like, oh, that is kind of interesting how that works out that way, that the constants would, like, they do seem to be optimizing or optimized for the number of black holes. And she's like, oh, this is interesting how it's not a reductionist theory. So she's kind of intrigued by it, but then she's also just like, well, it doesn't help us to actually calculate what the constants are or something, I guess. But it's like, I don't know. So you wouldn't find this like, to me it's like, that's a useful thing if you could actually show that the number of black holes is maximized by all the constants at their values that they have. And she also mentions David Deutsch's idea that maybe the constants are optimized for a certain type of universal computer to exist within the universe or something. And it's like, if you could show that the constants are exactly a certain way for these things, like that is either a very particular, peculiar coincidence, or there's something to it. And to me, to just be like, that's unscientific, there's no way that that's going to lead to anything useful, so that's not scientific at all. That's basically just religion. Go study theology. It's like, to me, I'm just like, come on, Sabine, come on. So, anyway, and I was like, well, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Maybe she's not so, like, gatekeeping of science. Well, then at the end of the book, in the epilogue, she comes back around to go drive another nail into all of this, like, gatekeeping. And yeah, she really does go back to basically say the same things again, that these theories in cosmology and trying to explain the constants and the interpretations of quantum mechanics, all of this stuff is just unscientific, and she really just I don't know how to read it any other way, but she's like, it is no better than religion, it's just religious thinking. And it's just like, come on, Sabine, really? Anyway, so that is part 3 of this. Love the book. It was full of interesting stuff, got my brain thinking about some things. I liked her attitude of kind of putting a check on everything, but I also felt like it was maybe like what do you want? She's definitely a shut up and calculate kind of girl, it seems.